taking a look now over in Tel Aviv as I read some of the latest reporting courtesy of the Associated Press. It says this: the U.S. and Israel pounded targets across Iran on Sunday, dropping massive bombs on the country's ballistic missile sites, wiping out warships as part of an intensifying military campaign following the killing of Iranian supreme leader. Blasts rattled windows across the country and sent plumes of smoke high into the sky above Tehran. More than 200 people have been killed since the start of the strikes. That's according to Iranian leaders. But as the bombardment went on, the conflict widened beyond the U.S., Israel, and Iran, with Iran-supported militant groups in Iraq and Lebanon claiming strikes on Israel and a U.S. base. Gulf states also warning that they could retaliate against Iran after strikes that hit key sites and killed at least 5 civilians. And after Britain said it would let the U.S. use its base as part of the war effort, Cyprus said a drone attack targeted a British base on the island. So there is a lot to get to, a lot to follow along. I also want to bring us out to this. It's a social media post from Israeli Air Force. Take a look on your screen. So it shows that the IDF identified that a short while ago, missiles were launched from Iran toward the territory of the State of Israel. Defense systems are operating to intercept the threat. In the last few minutes, the Home Front Command issued a preliminary directive directly to mobile phones in the relevant areas. The public is requested to exercise responsibility and act in accordance with the guidelines. They save lives. It goes on to say one must enter protected spaces upon receiving the alert and remain in them until a new announcement exit from the protected space will be permitted. Only after receiving an explicit directive, continue to act in accordance with the Home Front Command's guidelines. So again, a lot to get to on this front. Joining us now live from Jerusalem in Israel is going to be Alex Traiman. He is the CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief at the Jewish News Syndicate. Alex, good morning. Thanks for joining.
Good morning, Carell. Yeah, we just are hearing booms overhead as my family's inside the bomb shelter here in Jerusalem, and I popped out just to get on this interview.
And I guess that's what I want to start with, because you had mentioned to me off camera before that, yeah, you had just popped out of the bomb shelter. You saw that social media post from the Israeli Air Force. So talk to us. What's happening on the ground? What are you seeing, hearing, and how has this all evolved? We are 48 hours removed from those initial strikes on Iran.
Sure. We had a very, very serious attack yesterday. A ballistic missile struck a home in the Israeli town of Beit Shemesh. It killed an entire family, 4 people in the family, and 6 others who were in a nearby bomb shelter. So the ballistic missile basically struck very close to the bomb shelter. The bomb shelter didn't do anything. It was basically completely collapsed. Last night there was another ballistic missile in the northern section of Jerusalem, right outside of the neighborhood of Ramat Shlomo. It hit the main access road to that community, and it struck a car. Fortunately, the injuries were limited, but you could see the size of the crater here. And it's been reported that Iran is shooting hypersonic missiles, also missiles with cluster warheads, which are very, very difficult even for Israel's multi-layer missile defense system to intercept.
Obviously, this war not only escalating, but expanding now. When it comes to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also the IDF, we continue to get some updates from them via their social media platforms. What is the message that they're sending now to Israeli citizens on the ground who are, again, concerned about this conflict? They're hitting at home and possibly, a death toll.
Well, I think Israelis have been used to the situation over this past 2.5 years. Literally thousands of rockets have been fired at Israel, whether they be from Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and we've already received hundreds, if not already over 1,000 ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and drones from Iran over the past 2.5 years. So Israelis were prepared for this moment, specifically as we saw that Iranians were engaged once again in negotiations with President Trump. I think basically every single Israeli knew that this attack was going to happen. It was just a question of exactly when. So Israelis were braced for this, and Israelis are very supportive of the IDF and the Prime Minister in participating in this attack, especially if it means doing so together with the strongest air force in the world, which is the United States. So Israelis are doing their civic duty. They are getting as close to the bomb shelters as they can. Israelis are very, very resilient. They'll kind of continue their lives as much as possible within the guidelines, even in difficult situations. But we're just bracing and hoping that inside Tehran, the attacks are going as well as planned, maybe better than planned, and that this war will be over sooner than later.
You mentioned an interesting point within that last answer that I've heard from other experts that we've had on that are also based out of Israel, which is that Israeli civilians are used to this. That's why there's a lot of bomb shelters, there's already protocols, and a lot of the residents living there, they know, the next steps to take when things like this happen. But just to provide some more context here, Alex, for our viewers, how does this moment, specifically these strikes against Iran, kind of this widening conflict, how does it compare to situations that have been seen in the past where Israel has been involved in these conflicts?
Well, it definitely seems like this is the most intensive so far, even though the 12-day war was very intense. I think there's an understanding, appreciation here that this is actually the final battle. Last time in the 12-day war, Israel waited and actually didn't hit at Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, and basically decided together with the United States that they would leave the Islamic Republic in place. Here you see, obviously, that Khamenei was among the first targets together with the top echelons of the Islamic Republic, meaning that Israel was going to go all the way together with the United States. And therefore, it can also be assumed that Iran will go all the way, that they will use whatever it has at its disposal to attack Israel with. In fact, the reason why Iran has developed all of these weapons to begin with was for this moment to attack Israel. Specifically, if this is going to be the final moments of the Islamic Republic's existence, no doubt that they'll use anything that they have. So I think Israelis are bracing and recognize that this could be the most difficult of all the battles yet, but hopefully that this is the last one, and that with a new regime ushered in Iran that doesn't pursue nuclear weapons or ballistic missiles or fund terror proxies, that this last battle now could set up this country, which has been plagued by war for the last 2.5 years, for decades of peace.
Staying on this same talking point here, with the optimism that Israel and Israelis are showing that this would be the final intense battle with Iran and several of its proxy groups, obviously there are forms of retaliation that Israel is monitoring right now, whether that's direct missile fire, proxy forces, cyber attacks. What is Israel most concerned of when it comes to the IDF, also with the Prime Minister?
Well, I think that the ballistic missiles are proving to be, very, very dangerous threat, and especially if they're able to fire these hypersonic missiles, missiles with cluster warheads, missiles with a cluster warhead, even if they are intercepted by the Iron Dome system, they can still spread before the intercept into many pieces, each with limited warheads on them, and strike in many different places. The hypersonic missiles seem to be avoiding the sophisticated air defense systems. I think that the greater threat, the fear would be if Iran was able to take its 60% enriched uranium and create some kind of a dirty bomb or a chemical weapon. And the fear is that anything that Iran has at its disposal, it will use at this time, because there's not another time to use it.
Speaking of this dirty bomb and some of this uranium enrichment that Iran has been able to achieve, have Israeli officials commented on possibly how they're going to deter any kind of attack like that when it comes to chemical warfare, for example?
I don't think that there's any more deterrence than what the IDF and the United States are doing right now. I mean, they're striking at everything that they know about. They are striking, I believe, at every missile launcher the second it appears. Right, these are mobile missile launchers. So the second the Iranians use one, that obviously identifies its location, right? The sophisticated missile defense systems are able to, target these missiles in the air. They know exactly where they're going to fall, and using the same math, you can very easily figure out exactly where the missile was launched from. And so there's a race now to try to take out these missile launchers as fast as possible. And it was been reported that the missile launchers are actually the bottleneck. That the assessment was that Iran has as many as 2,500 ballistic missiles, but the amount of launchers that they have is much more limited. And so if Israel can strike those launchers, they can render any of the stockpiles useless if Iran is unable to fire them.
I want to take us out to a live look that we're just getting into our newsroom, Alex. This is a British Air Force base, and I just want to bring this up here because it has been confirmed here that an Iran attack has happened. Now, just yesterday, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer had, said that he was going to aid the U.S. in any kind of support that they need amid this wider conflict, which brings me to my next point. The Prime Minister of Israel as a whole has a very strong relationship with the U.S. on this front. Have any other world leaders been in contact with the Prime Minister in Israel as a whole when it comes to them defending themselves against these Iranian attacks?
Well, I think we've seen like the UK suggest a willingness together with together with Germany and France to participate in defensive measures of allies in the region. I don't think we really understand exactly what that means. You're looking at a Royal Air Force base in Cyprus, which is off the coast of the Mediterranean. Which is near to where to not far off the coast, and we know that the USS Gerald Ford is docked by Haifa now near Israel, and that there's also an air base that the British military uses in Cyprus. And I think we saw from the President of the United States, he said that they don't really need other countries to participate in the offensive actions. We already saw this morning reports that there was a friendly fire incident, and American F-15 was downed over Kuwait. Right now you've got the two best air forces in the region and possibly in the world, in the United States and Israel, taking care of Iran and have already achieved complete air superiority over Iran. It could just be that having other air forces enter into the fray without that type of very close coordination, that it might do more damage than good.
I want to move on to another point here and bring up this. It's a statement from the Iranian security chief. And it's a quote. It says, "We will not negotiate with the United States." So obviously this directed to the U.S., but Israel implicitly involved within this statement as well. Alex, what do you make of this going forward when it comes to any kind of de-escalation tactic, perhaps?
Well, I think we're past the escalation. The Iranians were given very, very forced warning about what would happen if they did not negotiate. The reason why we're in this now is because after the 12-day war in which the United States and Israel struck at the nuclear facilities and some of the ballistic missiles, this was the warning to Iran saying, hey, we're going to take out this nuclear capacity, we're going to take out the ballistic missile capacity, and we just expect you now to behave without that. And what did we see? We saw that Iran was trying to figure out how to restart its nuclear program and was increasing its production of ballistic missiles. And then President Trump entered into a negotiation with them and gave a very stern warning about what would happen if the negotiations broke down. That's exactly what happened. The negotiations broke down, and the president and Israel have to make good on their word now. And they recognize that it's not only the weapons, it's the people. And you just showed a picture of Larijani. I think Larijani is probably the next target on the list. I believe that his days as the security chief in Iran are numbered.
We also have another live image coming into our newsroom. Take a look at this, Alex. So this is the aftermath of one of those Iranian strikes. Beit Shemesh, over there in Israel. When we look at this image, can you also provide some more context and just a broader picture as to the damage that has been seen across Israel, also the death toll or the amount of people wounded?
Yeah, 9 people were killed in this attack and many others injured. This was a strike on a direct house inside a suburban community just maybe about 10 miles to the southwest of Jerusalem. And you see that the Iranians are targeting specifically civilian areas. I mean, they may also be trying to target military areas, but they are firing directly into population centers and just hoping that these missiles land wherever they land. Many of them, have an accuracy within some range of about 300 yards. So to them, it doesn't really matter necessarily if this ballistic missile hits, 300 yards this way or that way. If they fire it into a civilian population center, it can do damage wherever it falls. I think Israel's been very fortunate until now that several of the ballistic missiles have landed either in open areas. The one that hit last night in Jerusalem hit on a road at just a few hundred meters or 100 yards away from some buildings, some residential buildings. This one was a direct strike. The day before, on Saturday, there was a direct strike on a home in Tel Aviv, and we saw there that one woman was killed and about 20 other injured as well. And you see just how much destruction a singular ballistic missile can do here. I mean, this is a very, very wide area that you're looking at that was affected by damage from this missile. These missiles can be as large as a bus and can contain each one tons of explosives.
Talking a little bit more about these strikes, we have this live image. We also have the live image of Jerusalem that I started this conversation with. I believe we see the iron. Oh, well, there is the Iron Dome here. Do we know possibly a tally so far, Alex, of the amount of perhaps missiles or drones that have been intercepted before they could cause any real damage there in Israel?
We don't have specific numbers. I think that they don't want these numbers to be reported back to Iran. They don't want them to know how many of them are being getting through the intercept systems. And the real fear here is that that Iran could overrun the missile defense systems by firing many at a time. And we saw that last night with the volley that was sent to Jerusalem, that there were many ballistic missiles fired simultaneously at Jerusalem. And you saw videos taken from civilians with their cell phones of numerous intercepts, but you saw that one of those missiles did get through. But we do believe that the Iron Dome, the Arrow systems, the THAAD systems of the United States are intercepting many, if not most, of the missiles, but it doesn't take too many to do significant damage.
Alex, this story is being covered by major news outlets all over the world. As someone who is following all of these reports very closely, is there a specific topic or angle that you feel has not been talked about enough, or possibly something that people should keep an eye on that perhaps is not high on the priority right now when it comes to following these developments?
Well, we're waiting to see if there is some kind of an alternative leadership that's going to present itself inside Iran. I think this is the big question mark. The president had mentioned that perhaps there were some others that they had in mind who could lead Iran. We've seen the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, from exile, from abroad, sort of the symbolic leader that is attempting to unite the Iranian opposition forces. But it's not clear yet whether he will have the support of maybe some second tier levels or third tier levels in the IRGC or in the severely weakened Iranian army that could lead the country effectively on the ground. And we're waiting to see, will the Iranian people rally around somebody? Is there somebody that Israel and the United States can talk to as an alternative style, pro-Western, pro-modern leader that is going to direct this country of 100 million people away from the path of the fanatical Islamic Republic?
We also have yet another social media post that just came down from the Israeli Air Force. It says the IDF has now begun striking additional targets of the terrorist organization Hezbollah in Lebanon. Among the targets that were struck, weapons storage facilities and additional infrastructure of the terrorist organization Hezbollah in several areas in Lebanon. So these strikes happening there in Lebanon. It brings me to my next point, though, Alex, because Gaza, obviously, with this war between Israel and Hamas, that's something that is still, I mean, we're following it closely. So what do we know about the situation down in Gaza and anything new regarding the terrorist organization that is Hamas?
Well, Israel called up as many as 100,000 soldiers on Saturday, and they are there to make sure that Hamas doesn't pose a direct threat to Israel. But it is largely believed that the missile capacity that Hamas had, the rocket capacity, is largely eliminated at this point, and similarly that the IDF stationed and controlling 53% of the Gaza Strip, including all of the areas that border Israel, can protect any kind of incursion against Hamas. So that front is basically sealed right now. I think the more potent threat to Israel was whether or not Hezbollah would enter the war. I think Israel was prepared to keep the Lebanon theater out of the war if Hezbollah did not enter. And there was conflicting reports from the head of Hezbollah on Saturday and early on Sunday about whether or not Hezbollah would enter the fray. But missiles were fired last night at Haifa, and that essentially opened up that second front. And so we already have seen overnight that Israel's been striking hard, both in southern Lebanon as well as all the way far north as Beirut in the Dahia neighborhood, where it is known to be a Hezbollah stronghold. And as long as the Hezbollah is going to be active in this front, you're going to see the IDF, which prepared for a multi-front scenario, attacking there as well to eliminate what was once Iran's most potent terror proxy in the region.
Alex, you joined us yesterday morning, about 24 hours removed from those strikes. Today, 48 hours. You've been providing a lot of insight there as to what's happening on the ground and also what possibly could be the next steps for Israel and where we are at this stage in the conflict. We appreciate your time. Is there anything you feel you would like to add before that you go? We'll be in contact with you just to get all of those updates, but any final thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah, I think Israelis they are satisfied and are supporting the government in the strikes, but they don't know yet where the breakthrough will be in this conflict. We saw already on the first day, Israel took out Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, right? We would have thought perhaps that this was the final target. Instead, this was the first target, and waiting to see what the breaking point will be inside Tehran will be the turning point, whereby we see an end of the tunnel here. The president saying that the conflict could last for 4 to 5 weeks. Israelis will potentially have to brace, for 4 to 5 weeks of going inside and outside of bomb shelters here. Again, just a real tribute to the Israeli resilience. I think people don't recognize, how strong Israelis actually are in terms of their own civilian resilience, as well as the immense power of the IDF. It's really a tribute, I think, to the Israeli spirit, bravery, and that they're doing this really to transform the Middle East into one in which peace can finally reign, on the other side of this conflict.
It's a good point that you mentioned there. President Trump had said that this could be lasting for weeks. I believe I forgot to mention that off the top. But Alex will be monitoring this closely, watching out for us closely. Alex Traiman, CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. As always, we appreciate your time here at LiveNOW from Fox. Take care, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much, Carol.